The clinking of silverware against china plates filled the air, a stark contrast to the heavy silence that hung over our dinner table. I could feel Cynthia's eyes boring into me, her disapproval as palpable as the roast beef on my plate. "So, Sarah," Cynthia began, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "when will we hear the pitter-patter of little feet? It's been 5 years already." I forced a smile, feeling the weight of her expectations crushing me. "We're working on it, Cynthia," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. Andrew, my husband, shifted uncomfortably beside me. His hand found mine under the table, giving it a reassuring squeeze. But even that small gesture felt hollow. "Well, don't wait too long," Cynthia pressed on, oblivious to the tension. "You're not getting any younger, dear." I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to snap back. Instead, I took a sip of water, buying time to compose myself. "We'll let you know when there's news to share," I said finally, my tone leaving no room for further discussion. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of stilted conversation and meaningful glances between Andrew and me. As soon as we could politely excuse ourselves, we fled to the safety of our car. "I'm sorry," Andrew murmured as he started the engine. "You know how Mom gets." I nodded, too exhausted to speak. The truth was, we didn't know how Cynthia got. We also knew something she didn't, something that would shatter her dreams of grandchildren and possibly tear our family apart. As we drove home in silence, I couldn't help but wonder how long we could keep up this charade. How long before the pressure became too much? How long before our secret came to light? Little did I know, our world was about to implode in ways I could never have imagined. The days after that disastrous dinner blurred together, each one feeling heavier than the last. Cynthia's words echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of our secret burden. Andrew grew more distant, burying himself in work, while I struggled to keep up appearances. One morning, as I sipped my coffee, my phone buzzed with a text from Cynthia. "Brunch this Sunday. We need to discuss your family plans." I felt my stomach churn. "Andrew," I called out, my voice trembling. "Your mother wants to have brunch." He appeared in the doorway, his tie askew. "Can't you handle it?" "I've got a big presentation." "Handle it," I snapped, my frustration boiling over. "I've been handling it for months while you hide at work." Andrew's face hardened. "What do you want me to do, Sarah?" "Tell them the truth." "Maybe we should." I shot back. "How long can we keep lying?" He stormed out without another word, leaving me alone with my anger and despair. That afternoon my phone rang. It was Nicole, a friend from college I hadn't spoken to in years. "Sarah, I'm in town for a few days. Want to grab coffee?" I hesitated, then agreed. Maybe a friendly face was exactly what I needed. At the cafe, Nicole's warm smile was a balm to my frayed nerves. We chatted about old times, carefully avoiding the topic of families until Nicole gently asked, "So, how are things with you and Andrew?" The dam broke. Words poured out of me. The infertility, Cynthia's pressure, Andrew's distance. Nicole listened, her eyes filled with sympathy. Sarah," she said, squeezing my hand. "I had no idea. Is there anything I can do?" I shook my head, wiping away tears. "Just being here helps." I felt so alone. As we parted, Nicole hugged me tightly. "I'm here for you, whatever you need." Driving home, I felt lighter than I had in months. But as I pulled into the driveway, I saw Andrew's car already there. My heart sank. I'd completely forgotten about his presentation. I found him in the living room, his face unreadable. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice eerily calm. I was with Nicole," I stammered. "We ran into each other and—" "Nicole?" Andrew's eyebrows shot up. "You told her, didn't you?" The accusation in his voice stung. "I needed someone to talk to." I cried. "You're never here." Andrew's face twisted with anger and something else, fear. "You had no right," he hissed. "That was our secret." As he stormed upstairs, I stood frozen, realizing that our carefully constructed facade was beginning to crumble. And I wasn't sure if that terrified or relieved me. The tension in our house was unbearable after my confession to Nicole. Andrew barely spoke to me, and when he did, his words were clipped and cold. I felt like I was drowning in silence. One evening, desperate for some air, I suggested we meet Nicole for drinks. To my surprise, Andrew agreed. The bar was crowded, but Nicole waved us over to a quiet booth. "I'm so glad you both came," she said, her smile warm but her eyes darting nervously between us. As we sipped our drinks, the conversation flowed easier than it had at home. Maybe it was the alcohol or maybe it was Nicole's presence, but Andrew seemed to relax for the first time in weeks. "We can't have children," I blurted out suddenly, the words escaping before I could stop them. "Andrew is infertile, but we haven't told his parents. It's been so hard." Nicole's eyes widened. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. If you ever need anything, I'm here for you." I felt Andrew stiffen beside me, but when I glanced at him, his expression was unreadable. As the night wore on, I noticed something shift. Nicole and Andrew were laughing at inside jokes, their heads bent close together. I felt a pang of something. Jealousy? Exclusion? When we said our goodbyes, Nicole hugged Andrew a beat too long. "I'll see you soon," she murmured. On the drive home, Andrew was quiet again, but it was a different kind of silence. Thoughtful, almost anticipatory. "Nicole's been a good friend," he said suddenly. "Maybe we should spend more time with her." I nodded, unsure of what to say. Something had changed tonight, but I couldn't put my finger on what. As we climbed into bed, Andrew's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, a small smile playing on his lips. "Who's that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Just Nicole," he replied, turning away, saying she had a good time. I lay awake long after Andrew's breathing had evened out into sleep. The knot in my stomach tightened as I replayed the evening in my mind. Nicole's lingering hug, Andrew's sudden interest in spending more time with her, the late-night text. A horrible thought began to take root. Could Andrew be seeking comfort elsewhere? With Nicole? I pushed the idea away, disgusted with myself for even considering it. But as I finally drifted off to sleep, the seed of doubt had been planted, and I knew it would only grow from here. The weeks following our night out with Nicole were a blur of suspicion and heartache. Andrew's absences grew more frequent, his excuses flimsier. I found myself constantly checking his phone when he wasn't looking, hating myself for it but unable to stop. One evening, as I was folding laundry, Andrew's phone buzzed on the nightstand. I hesitated, my heart pounding. This was my chance to confirm or dispel my fears. With trembling hands, I picked up the phone. A text from Nicole lit up the screen. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same place." My world tilted on its axis. I stumbled to the bed, clutching the phone like a lifeline. This couldn't be happening. Not Andrew. Not Nicole. When Andrew came home, I was still sitting there numb. "Sarah? What's wrong?" he asked, his voice laced with concern that now felt like a mockery. I held up his phone. "Care to explain this?" The color drained from his face. "It's not what you think," he stammered. "Then what is it, Andrew?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Because it looks like you're having an affair with our friend."
He sank into a chair, his head in his hands. I don't know how it happened. We were just talking at first about the infertility, about how hard it's been. And then you decided to betray me?" I finished, my words sharp with pain. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I never meant to hurt you." I laughed bitterly. "Well, you did a spectacular job of it anyway." We talked, or rather argued, late into the night. Andrew swore it was just an emotional affair, that nothing physical had happened. But the trust was shattered. Every touch, every late night at work, every text message now felt tainted. As dawn broke, I made a decision. "I need some time away," I said, my voice hoarse from crying. "I'm going to stay with my parents for a while." Andrew nodded, defeated. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right, Sarah. I love you." Those words, once so comforting, now felt hollow. As I packed a bag, my mind raced. Could we come back from this? Did I even want to try? I left the house as the sun rose, feeling both terrified and oddly liberated. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The week at my parents' house was a blur of tears and sleepless nights. I felt hollow, betrayed not just by Andrew, but by Nicole too. How could they do this to me? On the 7th day, I received a text from Andrew. "We need to talk. Please come home." With a heavy heart, I drove back to the house we once shared. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Nicole's car parked next to Andrew's. My stomach churned. I found them sitting in the living room, their faces grim. Andrew stood as I entered, his eyes pleading. "Sarah, I'm so sorry," he began. "We never meant for this to happen." I cut him off. "Save it, Andrew. Just tell me why I'm here." Nicole spoke up, her voice trembling. We're in love, Sarah. It's not just an affair." The room spun. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself. "In love?" I choked out. Andrew stepped forward. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I want to be with Nicole. Can we divorce?" His words hit me like a physical blow. All the air left my lungs. "After everything we've been through?" I whispered. Then, anger surged through me. "Fine. I'll sign the papers." Nicole reached out, tears in her eyes. "Sarah, please understand, Dash." "Understand?" I spat. "You were my friend, Nicole. How could you?" Andrew tried to interject, but I held up a hand. "No, you don't get to speak. You want a divorce? You've got it. But don't expect me to make this easy for you." I turned to leave, but Andrew's next words stopped me cold. "There's more," he said quietly. "Nicole's pregnant." The world tilted on its axis. Pregnant. The one thing I couldn't give him. The betrayal cut deeper than I thought possible. I stumbled out of the house, gasping for air. As I reached my car, a decision crystallized in my mind. This house, this life, this pain. I needed to leave it all behind. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and called my mother. "Mom," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "I'm coming home. For good this time." As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of Andrew and Nicole in the rearview mirror, standing on the porch. They looked small, diminished. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of something new. Hope. It was time to rebuild my life. Without Andrew. Without the dreams we'd shared. It would be hard, but as I pointed my car towards my parents' house, I knew one thing for certain. I was going to be okay. The familiar scent of my mother's lavender sachets greeted me as I stepped into my childhood home. My parents stood in the doorway, their faces etched with concern and love. "Welcome home, sweetheart," Mom said, enveloping me in a warm embrace. "We're here for you, no matter what." I collapsed into her arms, finally allowing myself to break down. "Thank you, Mom," I sobbed. "I need this time to heal." The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, lawyer meetings, and sleepless nights. But slowly, with my parents' unwavering support, I began to piece myself back together. One morning, Dad suggested I apply for a job at his friend's marketing firm. "It might be good for you, Sarah," he said gently, "to get back out there." Surprisingly, I found myself nodding. It was time to reclaim my life. The job was challenging but invigorating. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose beyond being someone's wife or potential mother. I was Sarah Thompson again, not just Mrs. Lawson. Weeks turned into months. I threw myself into work, made new friends, and even started volunteering at a local animal shelter. The pain of Andrew's betrayal began to dull, replaced by a growing sense of independence and self-worth. One rainy afternoon, I ducked into a cozy cafe to escape the downpour. As I shook out my umbrella, I collided with a tall, handsome stranger. "I'm so sorry," we both exclaimed in unison, then laughed. "I'm Steve," he said, offering his hand. "Sarah," I replied, feeling an unexpected flutter in my chest. We ended up sharing a table, talking for hours over steaming mugs of coffee. Steve was kind, funny, and refreshingly honest about his own past heartbreaks. For the first time since my divorce, I felt a spark of possibility. As we exchanged numbers, promising to meet again, I caught sight of my reflection in the cafe window. The woman staring back at me was smiling, her eyes bright with hope. Walking home, I realized something profound. The end of my marriage hadn't been the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. That night, I called Mom to share my day. As I recounted meeting Steve, she chuckled softly. "You sound happy, Sarah," she said. "It's good to hear that spark in your voice again." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. "I am happy, Mom," I replied, surprised to find I meant it. For the first time in a long time, I'm excited about the future. As I hung up, I gazed out at the star-filled sky. The path ahead was uncertain, but for once that didn't scare me. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, on my own terms. My life with Steve was everything I'd ever dreamed of and more. Our whirlwind romance led to a quiet wedding, and before I knew it, I was pregnant. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of struggling with Andrew, here I was, effortlessly carrying a child. As I cradled our newborn daughter, Lily, Steve kissed my forehead. "Everything is good," he whispered. "Don't worry. We're in this together." Tears of joy streamed down my face. "Thank you, Steve. You've given me a new lease on life." Months flew by in a blur of midnight feedings and first smiles. I was happier than I'd ever been, my past with Andrew fading like a distant nightmare. Then came that fateful day at the mall. I was pushing Lily's stroller, Steve's arm around my waist, when I heard a familiar voice. "Sarah!" My blood ran cold. There, just a few feet away, stood Andrew, Nicole, and Cynthia. Nicole was visibly pregnant, Cynthia beaming at her side. Time seemed to stand still as our eyes met. Andrew looked shocked, his gaze darting between me, Steve, and Lily. Nicole's hand instinctively went to her swollen belly, while Cynthia's smile froze in place. We," Andrew stammered, clearly at a loss for words. Steve's arm tightened around me protectively. "Is everything okay, Sarah?" he asked quietly. I nodded, finding my voice. "Steve, this is Andrew, my ex-husband. And his family." Cynthia's eyes narrowed, taking in the scene. "So, you managed to have a baby after all," she said, her tone dripping with accusation. "I suppose your problem resolved itself?"
The old fear and shame threatened to overwhelm me, but then I felt Lily stir in her stroller. I looked down at my daughter, then back at the group before me. In that moment, I knew I had a choice: to let the past control me or to finally break free. Taking a deep breath, I squared my shoulders. "There was never any problem with me, Cynthia," I said clearly. "Andrew is the one who's infertile." The silence that followed was deafening. Andrew's face drained of color, while Nicole looked like she might faint. But it was Cynthia's reaction that shocked me most. Her eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed in fury. "What are you talking about?" she hissed. "Andrew and Nicole are expecting." "Clearly, you're mistaken." I felt Steve's hand on my back, lending me strength. "I'm not mistaken," I replied calmly. "Andrew's infertility was confirmed years ago. Whatever's happening now, well, that's not my concern anymore." As the implications of my words sank in, chaos erupted. Cynthia turned on Andrew, demanding answers. Cole burst into tears. And in the midst of it all, I stood firm, Steve and Lily by my side. Walking away from the commotion, I realized that the final chains of my past had broken. I was free, truly free, to embrace my future with the family I loved. The aftermath of our mall encounter was like a tornado tearing through the carefully constructed lies of the past. I watched from a distance as Cynthia's face contorted with rage and disbelief. "Wait. Why?" she sputtered, her eyes darting between Andrew and Nicole. "I thought you were infertile." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "What are you talking about?" "Andrew is the one who's infertile." The silence that followed was deafening. Andrew's face drained of color, while Nicole clutched her belly protectively. Cynthia's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You're lying," she hissed. "Nicole is pregnant." "Explain that." I felt Steve's hand on my shoulder, giving me strength. "I'm not lying, Cynthia. Andrew's infertility was medically confirmed years ago. Whatever's happening now, well, that's for you all to figure out." As the implications of my words sank in, chaos erupted. Cynthia turned on Andrew, demanding answers. Cole burst into tears. And in the midst of it all, I stood firm, Steve and Lily by my side. We walked away from the commotion, leaving behind the remnants of my old life. As we reached our car, I heard hurried footsteps behind us. "Sarah, wait."
It was Andrew, his face a mask of anguish and regret. I turned, bouncing Lily gently in my arms. "What is it, Andrew?" He hesitated, his eyes flickering between me and our daughter. I'm sorry. For everything. I should have been honest from the start." I nodded, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "Yes, you should have. But it's in the past now." Are you happy?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked at Steve, who smiled warmly, then down at Lily, peacefully sleeping in my arms. "Yes, Andrew. I'm very happy." As we drove home, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The final chains of my past had broken. I was free, truly free, to embrace my future with the family I loved. That night, as Steve and I tucked Lily into her crib, I whispered a silent prayer of gratitude. Thank God I got a divorce from Andrew. I now have a family precious to me, and I will take good care of them. Steve wrapped his arms around me, and we stood there, watching our daughter sleep. In that moment, I knew that all the pain, all the heartache, had led me to exactly where I was meant to be. My journey wasn't over, it was just beginning. But now I faced the future with hope, love, and the unshakable knowledge that I was strong enough to weather any storm. As we closed Lily's door and headed to bed, I smiled to myself. Life had thrown me curveballs, but I had come out swinging. And in the end, I had hit a home run.